Hi, everyone. We're just letting in a few more people. It looks like a few more people who RSVP are still joining, so we'll give everyone another minute and then we'll get started.
There's about 30 people that are in Microsoft Teams.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for letting me know that. I will jump over and let them know we're here.
I did send an email in that chat, but it doesn't seem like people are responding to it.
Maya, maybe joining and saying, hey, everybody, go over to Zoom might help.
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
Yeah, and I also see that Ismail sent over the Zoom link, and I did as well. Okay, so it looks like most of the people who RSVP have joined us now, and I will just continue to let people in as we get started. But before we do get started, I just want to share a quick reminder that we are recording this meeting and we'll send a video link once the meeting concludes. So thank you all for joining us to our 2022 All Staff Kickoff meeting. We have a really exciting lineup of colleagues who will be speaking today. We're going to get started with Yogesh first, who will be talking a little bit about ThinkWell's past, present, and future. And then following Yogesh, we'll hear from Jennifer Cooper, who's going to give us a timekeeping reminder. So without further ado, Yogesh, take it away. Let me see if he's here. It looks like his audio is connecting right now.
Hey everyone, there are a lot of people on Teams because there was a little button that says join. So I don't know how many people have made it back over to Zoom, but I was one of the few that went over to the Teams side.
Sorry for that confusion. I think a lot of people have jumped over. We have 70 participants, so I will keep letting people in, and then I'll be on Teams as well, letting people know that we're on Zoom. Do you want to give them a couple more minutes before we get started?
No, I think we should get started.
Okay, cool. Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is the first all staff meeting since the new year, and I hope Yeah, see, there's a bunch. So I hope everybody's doing well. I was trying to figure out what to talk about today. And, I was wondering whether I should talk about, where we are, where we were. Have people heard enough about where we were? And it occurred to me that there's so many new people that it would probably not be such a bad idea to talk a little bit about where this organization came from. And I think it's really useful to go into that because there's just so much scope and opportunity for the future. It's really big, it's really broad, and it's really exciting. And I feel like an appreciation of what got us to this point in the first place might be useful as context as we go forward. And so I, wanted to just start off by talking a little bit about where ThinkWell started and how it was formed. I mean, I was working for USAID at the before starting ThinkWell, and it was a pretty revealing experience. I mean, while there's a lot of potential to move lots of money and get a lot of things done around that way, majority of the decisions were not based on reality. A lot of the decisions were sort of based in the halls of USAID without having any understanding of what's actually going on in the country. And you talk to people in the ministry and in the ministries of health, and they just sort of, they acknowledge this reality, they go with the flow, and then they try to do what they can with what's left. But it's such a gap between what's needed and what it actually ends up being. And then because of this sort of lack of knowledge, you have a lot of contractors who are really risk averse and they just want to win. And so even if you have a good idea, trying to get a contractor to implement that and do it competently and do it in a way that will take risks and potentially fail is next to impossible. And then, around the whole culture of foreign assistance, what really put me off was sort of the toxicity of the culture. There was a lot of kind of shaming of this person's good, this person's not good. This is a good approach, this is a bad approach. It's really sort of judgmental to a point where so much defense is put up. People don't want to talk about what really works and what doesn't work. They just want to, armor up and not take risks. And so a lot of this kind of led me to just feel kind of unhappy with the way foreign assistance was working and the way development was working. And it's what ended up leading to the starting of ThinkWell. I didn't want to actually go into foreign assistance anymore. I wanted to leave. And then somebody from Rockefeller said to just sort of stop complaining and start actually doing something about it. And so ThinkWell was born. And what happened is in the very, very beginning days, we just got a bunch of people who felt very similar to I did. They signed up for this whole idea of helping countries realize their potential, and they felt suckered in that they got themselves into a situation where so much of it was about everything except that. And so there were, some folks early on that were somewhat disenchanted with the whole system and really weren't interested in their so-called careers any longer, but wanted to give it sort of a last try or a tough push without much regard to how it affected them personally. And so it was really like a little band of cowboys. And what we did was we just agreed that we're just going to push things unapologetically and just see what happens. Nirmala is one of the people that was involved at those early days, by the way. So it's good to have some institutional memory there. And really, the approach that we took was really kind of just challenging the status quo all the time. Really looking at what is being asked of us and does it really make sense? And so, I mean, here's an example. Like we were asked to do this assignment in Liberia where it was $70,000 to set up and design a community-based health insurance program, a social health insurance program, and a pay-for-performance program. And they wanted it done in 6 months, and they wanted to do those 3 things. And they also wanted us to assess whether user fees would make sense to add on top of that. It's not only like, totally without looking at the context of the country, but it's a ludicrous assignment in terms of just making that happen anywhere. So, we kind of had lots of negotiations, and finally they were like, no, this is what we have to do. So we're like, fine, we'll do it. We took the thing, and then once we took it, we're like, yeah, but we're going to do something different, because look at this country. We've deeply examined the context of the country. It's a small country, tiny population. The population, hold on a second. Sorry about that. It's a tiny population, and it has limited capacity. It's been through a lot of trauma, and there's no way they're going to be able to implement both social insurance, community-based health insurance, and pilot all these other programs. And we managed to work with a lot of folks around the country, and we brought in people. Like we brought in the former president, former CEO of the Philippines National Health System, Eduardo Benzin, and a bunch, somebody from Ghana who was involved in the early establishment of it. We brought them in, and we had them really look at the assumptions that they were having about what they thought they could do. And instead of that, we looked at the context. We spoke with the president's office. We talked about how her objectives were to have some kind of a legacy, and none of these things would have led to a legacy of anything positive. And so, based on all of that, we kind of changed the conversation. We talked, instead of about piloting a million different things, we said, let's just go with a big bang approach and create a national health equity fund, and even that is pushing it, but that's something that one can do, and one can have a legacy behind, and is somewhat manageable in terms of at least the basics of setting it up. And that's what we ended up doing, and of course, these things are short term with the way we were in the past. We weren't getting long-term contracts, but that's what we did. We managed to change the conversation, and this is the kind of thing that just kept happening over and over again. We went into Indonesia, where USAID wanted to do yet another 5-year program to train public midwives on the same thing they've been training them for the last 30 years, with limited to no results. And they wanted us to design a project to do yet the same thing over again. And we instead changed course and had them figure out how to work with private equity and private financing to be able to crowd in capital for better private sector quality services, and again, changing the conversation by examining the context and finding champions within the mission to be able to do that. So there were a series of these things that just kept happening. We would just go into these places. We would get these tiny little contracts of a couple $100,000. We would see what people wanted to do, and we would question the very foundation of why they wanted to do it, and work with them to come up with ideas that made more sense, frankly. And it just kept going like that. And at some point, it started to grow, and we started to just get more and more work. And I remember we did this analysis to see what people thought of us, and all of this work we've been doing, and all of the pushing, and all of the sort of trying to do things differently without regard to how it affects us individually or as a career, really started to have an impact. We got this grant from the Gates Foundation, which is now called the SP for PHC program. And one of the things that we heard from Ritu, formerly, who was at the foundation, she said, "You're edgy. You're always focused on the substance, yet you're always edgy at the same time." From Bangladesh, we argued that instead of funding 250 NGOs to do basically nothing for 30 years, it might be better to try to create a private network. And through that whole process, which ended up we ended up getting the work, but it didn't end up going very well. But through that whole process, USAID wrote us a note basically saying, you want to kill development as we know it. And we really love that, which was a really nice message to get. Lots of statements. We got statements like, I can always count on you for crazy but grounded ideas. Guy from ICAP in Colombia. USAID, at some point, someone from USAID called me up and said, "What's going on over there? All of the missions are asking how to access you to infuse innovation into their portfolios. We just need to find a mechanism for you." So, all of this started to really gain a lot of traction. Now, I want to just, we spent a lot of time really looking at the work and looking at the context of how things are happening and looking at the assumptions that were there and trying to figure out better ways of doing it. But internally as a team, there was a whole different dynamic that I think was part of the secret sauce to how things started happening really well. We were all sick of the toxic cultures that we had all come from. Toxic cultures in which people were competing with one another in ways in which you try to tear other people down, ways in which you look for ways of breaking other people's ideas down instead of building them up, looking for ways of gaining an edge on other people so you can get promoted, which means you have more power, which means you can do more of that and things like that. The organization was extremely flat. For the longest time, I didn't even want any titles, even myself, when people asked what my role in ThinkWell was, I would say I work on health financing. That's it. So really, we created a really amazing culture within the organization of, all the way up until the point where we were 25, 30 people. We were all really close. We related very openly. We were really honest with one another. When things didn't work, we would say it didn't work. When we didn't know what to do, we would say, I don't know how to do this. When things got messed up, we'd say, I screwed this up. And it was always met with compassion. And I feel like the kind of internal support that we created for one another was paramount to us being safe and secure to take the kinds of risks that we took to put forward the kind of wild ideas that we were putting forward. And that is really, something I'm proud of. At some point, we started to grow, and I'll get into the numbers in a little bit, but we started to grow, and our growth, we started to have to hire more people really quickly. We won projects that were bigger than a couple $100,000. We started winning projects that were 500, 600, and we needed to start hiring much faster than before. And because of the urgency, we were hiring people without really even, we were basing it on their technical skills, not so much on the values or the alignment with the philosophy of the organization. And at some point, we recognized that there are so many people in the organization that don't even know what we stand for. And so we spent a good period of time just trying to formalize what our values are, put it down on paper, and institutionalize that, in everything from how we recruit to how we interview, to how we promote and do evaluations and all of that. And I think all the values because I think we hammer them quite a bit, but just for fun, I'm going to read them. The first one is think big. Instead of piloting 10 different things, what if we just go for a big bang approach and try one thing that's going to work really well? Instead of just doing a study, why don't we just do an implementation of something? Instead of trying to prevent dual practice, and keep on policing it, why don't we just allow it and regulate it instead and charge for it? So all sorts of ideas that are outside the box and much bigger. But the idea is to not just be the ones that came up with everything, right? We're not trying to be the biggest narcissists in the development sector. The idea is to help come up with good ideas, but influence the conversation so that those ideas are championed by others. I mean, we can certainly support the development of ideas, but the championing of those ideas must be owned by others. And so a lot of what are successful things, a lot of our success happened when we influenced the conversation and we empowered others to be able to really do those things. And so those are two other values, think big, influence the conversation, and then empower others. Another value is to be exceptional. I mean, the mediocrity in this space is just mind-numbing. I was just on a call right before this with a board from a bunch of development organizations, as well as USAID and the Gates Foundation and others for this initiative. And I mean, it's amazing if you just erased like 30 years from today, if we backtrack 30 years, these conversations would be the same. It would be the exact same conversations, perhaps with a slightly different vocabulary. It's just the mediocrity and the lack of forward thinking and movement is huge, and it takes a lot to constantly work to try to move forward, even within myself and ourselves. And so I really felt that one of our values was that we don't settle for the status quo. We always try to be more exceptional about it and look to see what if, or what else can we do. The other thing is, we always question things. One of the big things that led to more big things was the way we would approach a problem. And it's like, okay, this is what we want to do. That's what we're told. And it's like, well, let's question that. Do we really want to do that? Is that really the right way? And asking basic questions on the fundamental premises on which many things are based can really lead to some incredible things. Again, we relate authentically to one another, and that has been a super important part of where we are. And learning is something that really never stops. So all of this is kind of what we what we started with, and we just some numbers, like all of this is really easy when you're small. We were a little cell, and in 2015 we had 9 staff members. We had 9 employees in 2015, and today we have 150. In 2015 we had $1.8 million total in revenue. That's it. And today our revenue is somewhere on the order of between 15 and 18. I don't fully know once everything's consolidated, but it's just in 6-ish years, our revenues 10x in that time. And the other really important thing is that we were I fundamentally believe that the firm needs to be based in the countries. And so at the time, it was just going to be me and a few folks. And so we were based in the countries. I started this thing when I was based in Bangladesh, and then I moved to Mozambique, and that's where we were. We really didn't have operations outside those 2 places, other than a few folks who are remotely based here and there. But really, the whole thing was that. And today it's a totally different world, right? We have both Mozambique and Bangladesh, but we have Kenya, Uganda, Philippines, Indonesia, Geneva, and others, Burkina Faso's, things like that. So it's a different world. And really, so what does that mean? I mean, if you look at that, what does it mean for us today? Well, I think that, a couple of things. When it was just like a few people, it was nice because a lot of it was in my hands. I could manage all of that. I had staff, and we did it, and it was a small cell of folks, and we just got things done. But it's not that anymore. The values are the same, but the system was never intended to be centralized. It was never intended to be some pyramid in which there's 1 or 2 people who are driving the entire organization. I mean, the whole notion was that how can we bring together people who are disaffected from the way things are happening normally? How can we bring them together, give them a platform, give them a mandate, and see what flourishes, right? And again, what does that mean for what we do? Because people are always wanting to know, what does ThinkWell do? And I have a tough time answering that question. I can tell you what kind of work we take on. We take on assignments that have transformative potential impact, right? The Merck work that we're doing has huge impact. If we're able to figure out a way to crowd in pharma to improve access and bring them not just as transactional partners to governments, but actual partners in the development of the systems, while also benefiting and profiting as they should, that would be transformational to bring that kind of capital in. If in Bangladesh, if we were actually successful to create the first largest network of private primary healthcare facilities that was centrally managed and run, that would be remarkable. Both in Bangladesh, it would create additional competition, and also it would be something for the world to look at in terms of how one can organize the private sector. So we take on assignments that have transformative potential. We take on assignments that are, focused on really stuck development problems, right? A lot of health financing, for example, has been somewhat stovepiped. You finance this thing that way, and another thing this way, and another thing that way, and at some point, health facilities getting revenue from 20 different places. Pay for performance here, insurance premium there, or insurance reimbursement there, salary money here, input cost there. At some point, one has to ask, where's the coherence in the system? And SP for PHC, among the many things it's doing, is trying to bring coherence, greater coherence to how health systems are financed and structured. So really looking at stuck development challenges. The other big thing that I think we do is we take on assignments that have a bit of risk attached to them, right? In Indonesia, instead of retraining 1 billion or 1 million midwives again on the same thing that they've been trained on forever, and training people and buying them stuff, maybe the approach would be to see how can you crowd in more. And we examined deeply the private capital markets and just saw there's so much money waiting on the sidelines, both domestically within Indonesia and regionally in Singapore and other places, waiting to invest in these markets because the potential is so high. And more than 70% of care is already delivered in the private sector. And so there's just enormous potential to organize and further fund or align the private healthcare delivery with the development goals that everybody has. And so helping people pivot and look at that goal, I think, a lot of risk because it's unclear what would happen and whose incentives would take over, and could it go horribly wrong and all of that. But it's a worthy thing to pursue. And inherently, all of the work that we end up taking on, requires complex systems thinking, right? It's not like we're just, buying things or training people, but it's really looking at the macro context and seeing where all the pieces are and how they all fit together and what we need to do to bring them together in a way that is, organizes them better, makes them more coherent, and kind of drives them in a particular direction. And so a lot of what we do is really kind of, within the complex systems lens. So what does that mean still? I didn't answer the question, like, what does ThinkWell do? And at some point I was kind of forced to make an answer to that. And we ended up saying we do health systems work and health financing work. And I don't really like that answer because I don't think it's true. I think that a lot of what we do is much broader systems work. I think we do much broader systems thinking, and I think we bring things together. We are a bunch of people who have look for creative solutions to complicated problems, and are really good at connecting the dots in ways that haven't been connected before. We enjoy that kind of development challenge, and we enjoy coming up with those kinds of socially impactful solutions. And so it's still not a clear answer. We don't just do reproductive health or maternal health or only health financing. But I think from a complex systems perspective, we're trying to organize things in ways that are more efficient, more effective, more innovative, and lead to better outcomes. And that opens the world to so much for us. And that's kind of where I want to go for the rest of this. Like, what does the future hold? The past, from 2015, 2016, even backwards, was effectively just me and a couple of other senior people, some mid or junior level analysts, and the operations, a few operations people, and that's what it was. But that's the organization, like I said, was never intended to be a single hierarchical system. It was always intended to be a distributed system, a distributed network of interesting and innovative platforms that were bound together by these common values. They were bound together by the common objective, but they took things in their own way. And that was where this vision has evolved to. And again, it's really important to try to create this decentralized thing. It can't just be the CEO or the leadership team or the management team or whatever driving the entire show. It's just not feasible. What is the role of the leadership team now? It has evolved from, kind of driving the show to holding space so you guys can drive the show. And we're at that critical juncture right now. If we continue to pretend that it's 2016 and that there's a small group of people who are supposed to be driving the show and everybody's supposed to be waiting for that show to be driven, we're in for quite a ride, and not a good one, I don't think, because it's impossible. There's too much talent, there's too much intellect, there's too much incentive and motivation within the firm to sap that all up in the hands of just a couple of people. And so really going forward, I'm really hoping that we can fully institutionalize this model of a decentralized network of super innovative platforms. Kamea, could you put that slide up that I wanted to show?
Yep, just 1 second, I'll pull it up.
Yeah. What I want to show is this slide that kind of lays out what I'm talking about. There we go. So we have sort of at the bottom, we have the country. This is the wrong slide. I gave you the wrong one. I'm sorry about that. This is supposed to be flipped around, but that's okay. So, at the bottom, which it shouldn't be at the bottom, but that is the platform. That's like the meat of the organization. Every country should be in itself this unique distributed this unique platform, just like it was when I was in Mozambique or in Bangladesh with a few analysts and some other people trying to drive things. It's now gotten to a point where that should be the case in Burkina, that should be the case in Uganda, that should be the case in Kenya, in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Mozambique, right? It should be a place where each of those places are various platforms, and whatever you guys want to do in those places, you should do, right? I mean, it needs to adhere to the values, right? And it needs to kind of align with what we do as an organization in terms of the kinds of assignments we take on and not being siloed and all of that. But there are many different ways that one can cut this, right? And there are things that we can do that are highly focused on public financial management. And there are things that we can do that are highly focused on just, politics and governance and advocacy and civil society engagement and stuff like that. And there's so many things in between. There's things that we can do on digital platforms. There's things that we can do on, a whole range of drug distribution and supply chain management and all of that. There's so many different areas that we can work on in the countries. Certain countries like Indonesia and Philippines and Kenya are very ripe for deep private engagement, both from capital markets as well as from providers. And other places like Burkina are really ripe for kind of greater coherence across the system and deepening and consolidation of some of the things that they've already started on, and kind of growing that capacity out. So there's different things that can happen in different places, right? But they're all going to meet those same criteria. They're going to have, whatever we do is going to have transformative impact. Whatever we're going to do is going to focus on long stuck problems. Whatever we're going to do is going to have some element of risk attached to it. We're not going to just do, standard stuff. And, it's going to require complex systems thinking. And so that's kind of where I am. I really want to see this this company become this network of distributed platforms. Now, if you've got these platforms, what's the point for the rest of the organization, right? And I think that where I see things going, you've got these platforms, but then there's stuff that everybody needs, right? You need to have finance and accounting. You need to have donor reporting. You need to have IT services. You need to have compliance and all this other stuff, right? But at the same time, and there's also need for, highly specialized expertise that go beyond just an individual country or even an individual region. So there's a lot of stuff there. And there's also a big need for creating global partnerships or regional partnerships that are harder to create from one's individual platform. And so what if we created, what if we had a distributed network of these platforms but they were supported and held together by a nucleus, which would provide this kind of expertise in strategy and finance and accounting and reporting and IT and compliance and all of those types of things, right? And that's where I'd like to see sort of the global kind of focus really be, is looking at that. But at the same time, I think we need to be working in service of common objectives and a common agenda, right? And I think we've just started with this ThinkWell Council, and I think there's a long way to go, because these are not easy governance structures to put into place. Everybody's still feeling out what their role is and how it's going to work and whether it works and all of that. And there's many things that we're doing right, and there's many things, you know, we could do better for sure. So it's not there yet. But the notion of having a council in which there's a representative from each of these innovative country platforms coming together as a governing body to be able to drive how the nucleus operates, right? Create that common agenda, figure out a coordinated fundraising strategy, you know, collective global advocacy. If we find things happening in 4 countries that are somewhat common, let's get, you know, let's have a system in which we can get everybody together on that global platform. And how do we make that happen? How do we facilitate that happen? How do we do technical cross-fertilization? I mean, there are so many mid and junior level staff in some of these countries that it's very difficult for them to get international experience. But, you know, sending somebody from you know, Burkina Faso to Mozambique or to Philippines or something for a couple of months or a year, whatever it is, for a certain period of time would be incredibly enlightening. And when they go back to their countries, they have so much more to offer. So how do we create these strategies in which we can have this cross-fertilization, and we can create global advocacy and share lessons across countries, what worked in Kenya and what didn't work in Mozambique and so forth, right? So, you know, the council's starting to talk about some of these issues. We're still kind of working on it, but this is kind of at its end state. It would be amazing to have this kind of governing body that's driving the nucleus to support these various country platforms, you know. And I think if we're able to pull this off, again, if we pull this off, there is no center. So I want to be clear, there is no headquarters. There is no ThinkWell headquarters. If somebody's using the word headquarters, you've got to correct them, right? And it's just wrong, because we don't have a headquarters. We don't have, I don't want this kind of like, you know, vertical hierarchy that's there. But if we're able to pull this off, we will create this interesting, democratic platform of countries that are benefiting from a shared economy, that are working with a co-created strategy. They're going to have incredible impact, right? They're going to have unfettered impact at the country level. They're going to be connected globally to change makers. I mean, you know, imagine being able to, well, you can, right? I mean, it's amazing to be able to speak with such luminaries like Professor Hasbullah or Marife in Philippines, or just so many. There's a whole, I mean, we have incredible people here. And instead of thinking of them as individual people in different places, think of them as your group of your practice, right? I mean, if this is a movement, then these are all the members of the movement. And really, I think if we're able to pull this off, it will be a different kind of organization. It'll be an organization that's, you know, not this kind of standard model of Washington-based development that is colonialist in many ways, as much as it is ineffective. And I think it will bring the best of the worlds of being able to leverage what's going on in the US and Europe in service of being able to have these country platforms become the really in the driver's seat of things. So you can close that slide now. Yeah, so I just have a few more things I want to say. So, you know, I really feel like trying to bring this vision to life is an important priority. But I also want to acknowledge, you know, how intense it's been as an organization. I mean, you know, I didn't want to have slides. That's why you don't see these graphs, but I was looking at the graphs of the staffing, you know, and when you go from 9 to 150 in like 5 years or whatever, it's the thing, it looks like this, right? And when you go to the revenue, 10x revenue in the same period of time, it also kind of looks like this. And so there has been a lot of change. I mean, every year it seems like, oh my God, how did I get through this year, right? And last year was another one of those years. It was so tumultuous, so many new staff coming on board, cycling out of so many staff, leaving. I mean, you know, I don't know how Jennifer manages, but audit after audit after audit, constantly in the process of, you know, strengthening our systems and making sure that we're compliant with everything. I mean, the compliance team, and I mean, kudos and hats off to being able to make all that happen and set the systems up for that. So there's been a huge amount of progress. And, you know, at the same time, how do you create an agility team that is responsive to programs? And how do you have a programs team that is genuinely understanding the corporate agility needs? And, you know, now we've created this new unit that Daniela is going to be heading up on program agility to really meet that. And so there's been so many structural changes, so much staff turnover, so much new staff coming in, so much growth, that it's been kind of a whirlwind, and everybody's trying to figure out, you know, which way is up. And so one of the priorities for the leadership team going forward is stabilization, is really trying to just kind of hold it down now and try to exhale and breathe a bit and figure out, how do we keep these things stable now? We've made so much progress, right? How do we shore up everything we've done? How do we build up Daniela's group? How do we strengthen financing, and so that they're not just focused on audit, but there's also lots of space to do a lot of other fun things, you know, things like that. Really, how do we take our business development processes and strengthen them so that they're more proactive and all of that? So really kind of focusing on the stabilization is one of the big goals. And again, the stabilization also is, we created all these structures. You know, we have this council and this management team and all these things. It's really about getting these groups into their stride. I'm not going to promise that it's all going to work out in 1 year. I think it's going to take longer. It's, if anything, I've learned I'm really too impatient about some of these things, but I've, you know, the focus is really going to be on trying to get these governing groups to work as well. The other thing I wanted to say is really on infusing innovation. So if you just kind of go back to what was the secret sauce, the reason I talked about all that stuff in the beginning, you know, we were unapologetic. We were putting out bold solutions. A lot of them went nowhere. Some of them really did go somewhere. I was just on a meeting with a large group of folks, including from the White House and from CDC and all of that. And it was basically a board meeting for this idea that I had pitched, and it's now become a big reality, and it's a big deal now. So you know, and it was risky and it made no sense to most people, and we just pushed and pushed and pushed, and now it's happening, right? And so, you know, that was what made us so interesting. If I remember some of those quotes I said, and there's many more, I didn't read them, but a lot of, we are known out there for all of that, you know, for not kind of being stuck to just, you know, trying to win contracts and increase our revenue and, you know, whatever, all that stuff. So we have to stay there. Like, we can't just become big and become a bunch of incumbents. We need to keep that mentality of doing things differently and all of that. And so another huge priority, and I feel like because of all of the growth in the last couple of years, we've been trying to figure out how to keep it together, and have not had the time to really figure out how to continue to innovate, which I think is normal. But I do think that this year, there needs to be a lot of emphasis on how are we going to be remain bleeding edge on everything that we do. And there's already really cool ideas that are emerging. You know, Sarbani and Andrea are talking about creating, and with Margaret are talking about creating an access platform for how we get things into middle-income countries, you know, for chronic care, diabetes, things like that. What can we do that's bigger than just working with individual organizations? But are there certain kinds of platforms that we can create that would support this? So there's, you know, initial talk on that. I find it really exciting. Where will it go? I have no idea, but I really like the conversations. You know, I strongly personally feel that the mental health area is woefully just underserved. I mean, there's been, despite all the talk with the Lancet series and the WHO thing, no money goes into mental health. It's like a couple percentage of foreign assistance go into mental health, and almost nothing goes into mental health from public systems. And we're talking about all these populations that have undergone so much trauma. They're undergone, all sorts of things with poverty, all the consequences of poverty, all the consequences of poor health systems and poor health status. And then you tack onto that, people's livelihoods and communities being torn apart through war, through famine, through urbanization, through all of that. And then you just go there and you tell somebody, all right, well, here's the SDG, right? You got to be able to read, you got to be able to, get a better job, you got to be able to do all these things, and who cares how you're feeling? Doesn't matter, right? Whereas in the West, it's like, everybody's such a snowflake, right? The little thing happens and we need therapy for like months and stuff. So it's kind of a major imbalance. I think it's super important, and it's a privilege to live in a society in which mental health is so cared for, and that when we do have problems, that there are ways of addressing those problems, without just having to quote unquote suck it up. But when it comes to these countries that are in the lower and middle income strata, they have precious little other than their communities to rely on. And it's fantastic that they have their communities to rely on. I think that's like much more than we have going on here in the States, for sure. But I think that there are a lot of innovations out there and ways of improving access to mental health services that could be brought to bear. And that's an area that I'm personally interested in looking at. And there are more. There's areas of that Alexis and others are looking at in terms of how do you support other organizations that are social innovators and provide backbone services to them and things like that. So those are some of the priorities for going forward for next year, really stabilization, strengthening of our governance structures, infusing innovation. The last thing I want to talk about is, what does this mean for you guys as individuals, right? So I want to be super clear, like, this isn't just something that like a few people in the organization are going to do. It can't be. If that's how it ends up coming out, then it's just not going to happen. It's going to be something that the whole firm works on together, right? And so the first point in that is to own that and to recognize that. Like, if this is a mission that resonates with you, then own it. Like, be a part of it, be a part of the solution for it. Like, we can't wait for things to happen, and we can't, when things don't happen the way we want, we can't feel that things are happening to us, right? We have to be activators in all of this. And so the first ask of everybody in this firm is to please, there's so many pieces that need to get picked up. Help pick up the pieces, be in charge of picking up those pieces. If the governance isn't working, call it out, but don't just call it out and say, here's what we can do instead. This isn't working, but why don't we try this? If there's an area of innovation that we need to focus on, but we're not, just say, we're not focusing on this, and here's what we could do to focus on it. If our culture is becoming toxic in certain places, call it out. Don't just say, I'm a victim because it's called toxic culture. Just say, the culture here is not adhering to what I thought ThinkWell was supposed to be, and here are some things that I think we can do to change it. Be part of the change. It's what I'm asking. It sounds kind of corny, but that's really where I'm going with this. I need everybody to be empowered to be part of the change, solution-oriented, holding on to what can happen and helping make it happen. Because if you rely, I promise you, if you rely on leadership and a few, the directors and stuff, I think we're pretty competent. We're pretty good at what we do, but we can't do it. It's not going to work. It will not work. So you need to be part of the change. The second thing I ask is, to maintain the culture. So many of you are new. It's just mind-boggling. I mean, over the New Year's, I was like, every day on Bamboo, it's like all these people joining. I'm like, what is going on here? But you're all so new to this, and especially to the ones who are new, I hope you feel that this is a different kind of organization. And I know that many people come from other organizations that have very different cultures, and please just kind of look at the culture that we're trying to create, that we did create in the past, that we've maintained and created in the past, and try to align with that if it resonates with you. And if it does, please help propagate it, because it just can't be me saying stuff anymore. It can't be the director saying stuff anymore. It's gotta be everybody. And when you see things that are happening that are out of line with our culture, please just say, hey, I didn't realize ThinkWell was like this. If somebody's not saying that we messed up, just be like, really? We're not gonna talk about how we messed up. Are we gonna just be defensive about it and pretend it didn't happen? It's not how we work as an organization. So really just maintain our culture, keep, questioning the assumptions and looking for those wild solutions and assessing the risk and figuring out how to make things happen. Again, I think, innovation is a big thing, and we've gotten so much work so fast that we're trying to just keep up with what's being asked of us. But I think this year we should look up and look around, look adjacently to what's going on, look at the work that you're doing and look next to it and say, could we also be doing this? Or there's a gap over here. Why are we working on this, but not, linking it to that, and there's so many things like that. And when we were a small platform, we were able to do that because it was just a few of us. But now I'm asking all of these platforms, all of you, to please do that in your work. Look to see what's next door. Look to see what else we could do. What's the adjacent possible in the work that you're doing. And really, I want to say this clearly, like from me as a very reluctant CEO, if you have ideas that you think are interesting, I'm asking you, I'm imploring you to please bring them directly to me. Certainly bring them to whoever else you want. You can bring them to your directors or your supervisors or wherever you want to go in the channel. But if you feel like you want to bring an idea, if you feel like you have an idea and you want to pursue it, please bring it directly to me. I really appreciate how Cal, who had a bunch of really great ideas in mental health, just brought them to me. Mira also has brought a bunch of really interesting ideas to me, and I appreciate that. And I'll do whatever I can to ensure the organization can support some of this stuff. So that's really all I wanted to say. I spoke a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you for being on for those who have been around long enough. Thanks for continuing to be on the journey, and for the new ones, I guess I'd say buckle up, because it's going to be a stable ride, but it's still going to be a ride. I can promise you that. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Yogesh, for that. We did slot some time for questions. So is that okay to move forward with that? Great. If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you prefer, just drop it in the chat and I can read it out loud.
I have a question for Yogesh, Shabani. Yogesh, I really love your vision. Maybe that's why I joined the company, because, I've worked in development for many years, and I worked for the private sector and back in development, and I saw how development hasn't changed at all, which is shocking, because in the private sector, because it's competitive, you go out of business. So you have to constantly change yourself. But I think the question I have is, I also find that development organizations, it doesn't seem like, or maybe this is a cynical comment, they're not changing fast enough because there's no accountability from governments to ask them to change. So the question I have for ThinkWell is, how do we influence that discussion? Do you see that as a part of our role? I love your focus that we should influence the conversation, because the more people we work with and we bring good, bold technical solutions, there will be uptake. So it's more productive than trying to only focus on the political economy. But I would love to hear your thoughts as how can we break that neo-dependency, which has really been created, and I really think has even been strengthened with COVID-19 now, with more donor funds going into countries across the world. Over.
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I feel like where does all of it start, right? It all starts with the funders. When you have when you have an organization in Seattle that all reports to one person asking how you're going to not be neo-colonialist and mandating that you're not neo-colonialist, and then requiring like an unending barrage of reporting back to you and being upset if you don't do a PowerPoint in a McKinsey style that they grew up in, and then again hammering you on why you're how you're not being neo-colonialist, it's really difficult, right? It's really, really difficult. And so I think that there's a lot of there's many elements to it. The first element is really the funding landscape. The funders are from, big ones are largely from these places, from around here. And they're very directive. And they have all sorts of things that make it difficult to break out of that. Do I feel like we're going to be able to change all that? I would love to, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think the best thing that we can do is call it out. I think we can advocate for the issues, that need to change. I think we can do that by writing pieces and giving talks and things like that. But I also think that we can do it by demonstrating a different way, right? I think that, like you said, Sarbani, it's a competitive market, whether it's, private sector or not. And I think when people start to do things differently, and it starts to get attention, things follow. When we created our whole website and everything, we talked about challenging the status quo and all that. And it was like, nobody was doing that. And now every single website talks about challenging the status quo, right? It's just kind of incredible, right? So I think that we can do it by demonstrating. And us, final point, I think, you are what you eat, right? And so if you keep on taking restricted money from these organizations who are very directive in what they want, you end up having a hard time. You have less degrees of freedom, let's just say. And I think that there needs to be a bigger emphasis on getting funds from different people with different types of incentives and seeing how far we can go with that.
Are there any other questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself. There's nothing in the chat yet, except for a few thank yous, Yogesh, for all of the insights, especially for new staff. And I have to agree, as someone who's fairly new, all of the historical background has been immensely valuable, and it's really inspiring to hear where we're going in the future. Okay.
So with 1 minute remaining, I guess I'm just going to end this with yet again, the same plea. This is a huge year for us. It's a year in which a lot of what we want to do gets consolidated, stabilized, and kind of moves into new directions. And please, it's going to be messy. It always is. And the only way it's going to work is if you're part of it. It's not happening to you. It's happening kind of through you, right? Like you're the activator. I need everybody in the firm to be activated, not to be victimized by what's there. If something doesn't work, come up with the solutions. And even if they're crazy solutions, at least be solution oriented. I think that thinking around how can we all work to make this a better place is really, really going to be necessary as we move into this kind of next phase of growth, which is a big one. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you. And we also have a message from Jennifer Cooper. So Jennifer, whenever you're ready, please take it away.
Sure. Hi, everybody. There's so many new people that I hate saying that I'm going to talk about timesheets, but with so many people being new, I just wanted to make sure you guys know why we're asking. Whenever we send the reminders and whenever I know you guys are doing such like fun, innovative things, and that's great. And I just want to make sure everybody knows on our side, while you're doing all those fun, innovative things, we are required to prove to donors how their money is being spent. And the main way we do that is through we often have to show them timesheets. So when we're asking and sending reminders that come from Melissa about timesheets on time, everything we do on the financial side, it all runs through timesheets. So we, not to get too high level or too low level, but we allocate all our costs based on timesheets. And so everything we do, that is what drives it. So when everything isn't in by the deadline, it puts us at a stop, a complete stop. So I just wanted to, just to remind you guys, we send out several reminders. If you have trouble, do not hesitate to reach out. There's always information on the reminders, and we are here and happy to help you. It's really helpful for us and for us to meet our reporting requirements and to help the leaders make decisions if we have those things done on time. So that's all I have. So, and welcome to all the new people. I'm really excited to see how much we've grown. And thanks, Yogesh, for the message. It was really, really exciting to see where we're going.
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer, for that message. And again, thank you, Yogesh, for the deep dive. And also thank you to everyone who helped bring all the folks that were on Teams over to Zoom. Was really helpful. Thank you. So with that, I guess we all get 30 minutes back. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.